In honor of International Women's Day, we are shining a spotlight on one of our own, Deena Ghazarian, the CEO of Austere. Hi, Deena.
Hi, Haley. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
All right. So you started the company Austere 2 years ago. How have you grown as a female entrepreneur since then?
So I would say it's I kind of have always had this entrepreneurship blood kind of in my veins. My father was an entrepreneur, so kind of as a kid, when you grow up with an entrepreneur, you see what that life is like, and that's kind of what becomes your reality or your norm, but never really have had that kind of entrepreneurship responsibility really until, Austere really truly came into play. And I would say, like, in the past 2 years, there's a couple of things that, and I don't think the pandemic helped at all, but there's a couple of things that I would say I've definitely grown because of it, in that this whole idea that you cannot get caught up in the highs and the lows as you're growing a business. A lot of people say this is truly a marathon, and in no way is this a sprint. And so, especially when you have a sales type of background, the sprint is really kind of what keeps you going. And so shifting from that mentality to a much more longer term, strategic, patient focus, I think is really where I've changed a lot of my skill set over the last 2 years. It's actually made me probably even a better person. I would say I have way more patience now than I ever have. Which is good for your family. It's good for your coworkers. It's good for a lot of things, as well as staying patient when you're running a business.
You are also a part of many groups and networks of women entrepreneurs. How did having that support help you develop your company?
So I leverage a lot of different people, I would say, when you have questions, reaching out to them, bouncing ideas off of them. I would say, in most cases, I actually leverage anybody in my network, in most cases, to do things like that, to help develop the company and move it forward. But where I specifically will reach out to maybe another fellow woman entrepreneur and or friend that is maybe working for a very large organization, not an entrepreneurial type one, but still runs that entrepreneurial business within those organizations. It's different when you will ask the question of a woman when, so I'll give you a great example. So, one time I asked one of my female friends, hey, listen, so in this particular case about hiring this type of individual in a role that had never existed for Austere before. I'd seen it in other organizations, and this organization had it, and I asked them, what were the pros and the cons and how that would work. And it's so funny because the female entrepreneur gave me such a different layer of advice and how to balance and leverage the team and what to look for in the holistic part of the team, because this role sometimes would be a little bit more challenging or taxing of everybody in the business for the betterment of the business. And, it's so funny when you talk to a female about it, they have that, kind of like inclusivity type of approach, make sure that you find someone that's got a good, kind of like that even keel personality to make it work. Where if you were to speak more to, let's say, a male entrepreneur, they would be like, well, it's just critical for the company to move forward, right? And there isn't that extra thought. So I would say it is a, usually you come to the same answer when you ask, but it's such a different approach and vision, I think, from either gender, let's just say, when you go and you're out there and you're asking. So that's number one. Number two, I've seen such a rally just around all of my other female friends promoting other female businesses, and just the support and shout outs has been pretty amazing to help the business move forward. So that's been good to see too.
What are the main challenges as a female entrepreneur in the tech accessory industry?
So I tend to answer this question, I think, probably a little different than most would. It's funny, I say it all the time, I don't see myself as a female entrepreneur in a tech industry. I see myself as an entrepreneur in a pretty freaking great industry. That is what is technology that runs through every single pore of every business nowadays. It's not, yes, there is tech product, and yes, there is electronics product, which really led the revolution around what we now call tech. But I would say the the difference now is every industry has some sort of tech in it and kind of moving it forward. But really the challenges, I think, are the same challenges that anybody would have in that spot. It's not necessarily female driven in some cases, right? So the way you run a business, the way you think about cash flow all the time, for sure, I think those are the same no matter if you were a male or female in the role. I would say where I've seen a slight difference, and it's because I'm also very involved in other parts of different organizations, is the female entrepreneur really does have a harder time raising money and funds for their businesses. And it is very obvious to watch. And I'll give you a great example. When we went looking for money for Austere to build and raise the business, I talked to a bunch of different people who were like, nope, it's your product is a commodity. You're never going to get growth out of this just because you're trying to step up and have more value for a little bit better price. There's no way the customer is going to be interested in that. And so, again, I always say you have to figure out who's your right fit. So we did find a partner that believed in us, and here we are 3 years later and we're crushing it. And what's fun is to go back to those same people who said, there's no way you'll be successful. And they're like, what are you doing over there? How are you everywhere? And it's like, wow. And I think a little bit of that might've been from the fact that it was a female driven business. I mean, no one ever came out and said that, but if you look at the statistics and you look at what's out there, it's kind of hard to refute.
So you mentioned being a part of some different organizations and stuff. You were elected as the vice chair of the CTA 2021 executive board. How did that make you feel to be acknowledged for something like that?
Oh, very humbling. I'm very active in the Consumer Technology Association because I really believe in what they do. And it's my way to kind of give back to our industry because it's strictly a volunteer role and job. So, you're giving back truly for the betterment of everybody. And I've been in this industry a long time. It's 22 years, as much as I hate to admit that. And, the CTA group has been very kind to me in allowing me to have a voice. And so whatever I can do to give back and drive that has been pretty special to me. So the fact that, they put me in leadership for that as well has just been a complete humbling experience. And it's very cool.
So being a CEO or a female CEO, do you think that it's easier now than before? And how has that support system changed over the last few years for you?
Absolutely, it's easier. And by the way, it's going to continue to get easier. If you, someday down the road, when you become a CEO, it'll be like 10 times easier for when you are. And then when my daughter, Ella, God forbid that happens too, right? It'll always get easier. I think the more voices and women that we have at the table driving that forward and balancing. See, and that's the one thing I know some women leaders talk about it a lot, but there is really this balance that goes on, especially if you are running a company and you have a family, and you still have your significant other, that you're trying to balance a relationship to. There's so much there to balance. And sometimes as women, we feel very guilty if we're not juggling all of the balls in the air and fairly balancing, right? So and what you have to get used to is there'll be times where you cannot equally balance everything. No way. And so, the more support structure that's there, the more you choose. I would say, I was super fortunate. I picked the best, most understanding partner on the planet. So my significant other is super supportive of the business, and, we balance. And so I don't think that would have happened if my mom had tried to be a CEO 20, 30 some years ago, right? So I think it's constantly getting better. And I think the more of us that go through it now will just even make it easier for everyone in the future. So it's just supporting that growth and driving it.
Well, thank you for making it easier for us.
Yeah. No problem.
What advice would you give to other female entrepreneurs?
Oh God, to take guilt and stick it in the back of the closet and don't let it out. That's number one. Running a business is running a business. And I think that is really one of the main differences I feel sometimes between men and women. Like, men don't leverage or let guilt really get to them, I think, as much as women do. And so, just moving it forward and driving, and that's easier said than done. So, I'm sure I'm talking out both sides of my mouth because I still feel guilty all the time. But if I could get anybody in the beginning and say, if there's one thing you could like, make sure that you stop from day one and build that behavior, it's stick guilt in the back closet and just go. Put your foot on that pedal and just go as fast as you can. And don't give up. You have crappy days, but man, when you have the good days and it keeps you going forward, again, you have to just keep going. There will be that break every time, even in the lowest of lows. If in your heart, you know what you're doing is right and you've set it up correctly.
So what would you say is your biggest achievement so far over the last however many years you've been in the industry?
Oh gosh. So it's funny. I've been in the industry for a long time. I mean, I have made every mistake you could make, right? So, or at least you think. And so, when you kind of start something, you're like, all right, I've been, doing this for others for a really long time. And I think I know what to do to move the ball forward. Hence the reason why you start something in the first place. And you leverage those experiences to get you to the next level. And I would say that 90% of what we did with Austere was exactly that. And then you go through something in a lifetime that you will never, ever, well, pray that we never, ever experience again. But, the pandemic, I can't even begin to explain how you just get a company up and running. I mean, we weren't even up and running 6 months. And this pandemic hits and you're like, oh my God, I am going to kill a company in less than a year from starting it. Sweet. This is going to be so great. And it is, I would say, hands down, the fact that we survived and thrived in what was probably the most insane period of anyone's lifetime that will, happen in the next, hopefully 100 years, to say that we did okay is by far, I think, our biggest achievement.
So what is the next goal on your list?
I would say that within Austere, I'm pretty passionate about, you start a company, and again, I told guilt to go sit in that back closet, but it's going to come out and knock on the door for a second. I told everyone when we started the company, I wanted to stand for something that was bigger than us. And when you start a company, you think about that, or at least I think a lot of people think about that today more so than they've ever done. And I think what naturally came up in creating this business was, and again, because I hadn't done it, I didn't know that this would kind of like smack us upside the, side of the head, was, wow, there is so much waste and there is so much wrong with our industry when it comes to sustainability, and there's so much that can be done, yet there's so much that hasn't been done. And people like, leaders and organizations really do need to lead the way. And so really kind of since day one, and in doing so and redesigning what is typical from packaging in our space that was generally plastic, and the fact that that wasn't getting recycled because it's expensive, and starting to think through packaging just at a start has now blossomed into, I think, bigger than that. And so more and more from us, we're going to do our best to lead the way in a bigger sustainability story, and then walk the walk with what we do at Austere, or try our best to walk the walk at what we do, with Austere. My favorite conversation so far in regards to sustainability is, the first thing I pushed our guys to do was, hey, how do you make a cable sustainable? And it was funny. They went and did homework and came back and said, well, you're not going to really love this answer. And I go, well, what do you mean? And they said, so in order for things to be safety certified and blessed, right, that can be in someone's home and make sure things are safe, because, you are dealing with electricity in some cases and signal passing, all that. They're like, there's certain standards for the cable that you have to use plastics, and these plastics right now are just not recyclable. And so we have to create something different. And the one thing that was created has been soy based. And the funny thing is that when you're dealing with energy drives heat. And when you heat up soy, it smells really good to rodents and rats and everything else. And so people who have used soy now are getting I guess a car company one time used it for something, and the bottom of the car got eaten out. It's crazy. So there really does need to be a lot of innovation in this space, and I think and education. And so we're going to do, our best at Austere to drive this from the top. And so when you say what is next on the goal list, it's not only to drive our business and do the right thing by the customer for the experience of what they get from the best accessories that drive, best tech with the best design. But we're going to leverage design to really kind of take sustainability to the next level, I hope. And that is truly one of my biggest goals.
Awesome. Well, thanks for giving us your time today.
No problem. I love doing this. Let's do this again.
We should.
Yes.